All right, Blazor fans, it's time for another episode of the Blazor Power Hour. This week, we're going to talk about loading, um, loading animations, loading states, that sort of thing. There's a lot of different ways to handle loading animations in your applications for a lot of different reasons. So we should probably break down the different kinds, what they're used for, and just do some demos. So we'll throw a lot of different demos at you today and let you see which ones that you need for your project. Hopefully, you find something that helps. And of course, we have questions open in the chat room here. So if you have a question, you want to see something that you're working with, you're struggling with something that's related to the topic, then go ahead and post that in chat. We'll see if we can get you some help. So let's throw the good old fashioned hollow mirrors up, and then I'll jump over to a Blazor REPL. So one of the easiest ways to demo this type of stuff is to go to blazorrepl.telerik.com, and then I can mess around with stuff in real time, and we can take a look at different styles of loaders that are out there and find the one that fits your project just right. Might actually need multiples of these, by the way, in the same project, but let's take a look. So, one of the first things I want to show is a project of my own. It's free, it's open source. Other folks are using it in their libraries, things like that. And you can get it on NuGet. It is a very easy thing to install, and the documentation's pretty good. It's up here on GitHub as well. So, this one's called Blazor Pro Spin Kit. And you may have seen this on the show before. If you're new, maybe not, but I'll drop this one in chat again. Apologize for that hollow mirror effect. Still need to get that second monitor up and running. But Blazor Pro Spin Kit is a package of spinners that I ported from just kind of a vanilla CSS world. The original project is linked here by Tobias Allen. And if we jump over to his project, this is essentially what I borrowed is his really cool CSS loading animations. And what's nice about these is there is no JavaScript involved. It's all based on just regular CSS code. It's just done very cleverly with animation and keyframes and timelines and things like that. And it just works. It just works. And it's nice looking. There's a bunch of different styles that you can choose from, different block animations and spinning animations and whatnot. So I decided to wrap these in some Blazor components and built this nice little library. And there's some other little helpers in here as well. There's an animation container that you can use. You can, with a very quick snippet, throw a modal dialog on there. You can use this as a loader for your entire Blazor app as well, because you can use it externally to Blazor outside of the component model. You just use the CSS raw and load your application before Blazor gets there. So if you really have a long loading time for some reason, long loading times aren't ideal, but when you need to have something up there to show some sort of progress, these things can help. So setting this up is pretty straightforward. You're going to go to NuGet, install the package. So if we go over to Blazor REPL, we can get this up and running very quick and easy through the NuGet package manager built into Blazor REPL. So if I search for the package, I keep most of my stuff under this Blazor Pro namespace. You'll see that we have the Blazor Pro Spin Kit package, and we can install that right into the editor here in the browser. Now, Smab UK is finally here at the top of the show. Welcome, Smab UK. Nice to have you back. Glad you could make it before the show's over this time. When we install NuGet packages through Blazor REPL, it does help us with some of the other installation steps here. It did add the CSS file that came with the NuGet package. Normally, this is a manual step. You'll copy this link here to the top of your index page or your host CSHTML page. We've got our CSS linked here. And then once the CSS is linked, we'll just need to drop a using statement into the page and we should be able to use these spinners. So get our spinner using statement in here, come up to the top of the page and say using Blazor Pro.SpinKit. And I capitalized that correctly, did. And then we can paste in our components and hit run, and we should be able to see all of the spinners on the page. And just that easy, we have our spinners. Now they're pretty dumb. Not visually, they look good, but they don't have any intelligence behind them. There's no code really inside of the spinner itself to make it hide or show or anything like that. It just is what it is. You display the spinner and it spins. And it was done that way pretty intentionally. So we don't have any concept of hiding or showing the spinner. That's kind of up to you how you'd like to do that. So one of the easiest ways to do it is to set up some sort of flag on your component. Now, whether you're loading in like a data grid here or something else, there's some sort of long running process that we want to display one of these nice spinners for. So we'll take one of these animations. I really like the wave. That one's pretty cool. So let's isolate the wave there. And we need to wrap this in some logic to make it hide and show. So what we'll do is we'll just set up a flag here and just say is loading and set it to true. And if it's loading, then it will display. We'll put a little if statement around this and say is loading, and we'll block that in. So now if our is loading flag is true, we'll show the wave. So we can run that and wave should still be displaying because it's set to true all the time. Again, that's not ideal. What we'd probably want to do is have some kind of async thing running in the background, getting data for the page, whatever it is. And then when that operation is done, it goes in and sets the flag to true. If you want to kind of fool around with this a little bit, just to have something that's that you can like click on something and hide and show this, you can just wire that up to a little bit of an input. Say input type is checkbox, and then you could say at bind value equals is loading. And what you can do with this, just put a little label here. We'll say show and hide. And what this is going to do, if I run it again, is just give me a checkbox I can click on and I can kind of simulate hiding and showing that thing in. Oh, there it goes. And say it didn't work, but now it is. All right. So essentially your process runs. When the process is done, it hides it. And then if that process needs to run again, it shows it. You might have to have some sort of other statement in here with it. So like an else. If it's not loading, then there's, we'll just throw an H1 tag in here for the moment and just say, yeah, that task is complete. Maybe it's a data grid, or maybe it's some other long running service that gets, or a component that gets displayed there. So we've got that type of loader. There's some other goodies in here. There's other stuff in here that we could kind of utilize. And we've got bigger examples here too. I don't have a fetch data service available to go ahead and throw that entire data grid up there, but we can look at the code and you can kind of gather how this would work. We've got our typical loading statement here. And this is what we're trying to avoid. We want to put some sort of nice spin on it. No, nobody. Okay. So we want to put some nice style on it. And this is what the refactoring looks like with a component from SpinKit. This is a spin loader or a container, and it kind of handles this if statement stuff for us. So if I zoom in a little bit here, come on, zoom. I've got no zoom. We'll zoom the browser. There we go. So if you look at this if else statement here, we could wrap that up into a component, which is what I've done over here on this page. We have spin loader and it has a content template, which is the completed task that we are waiting for the spinner to complete. So we could do that instead of what we have here. So if we come in and just say spin loader, and then we have an is loading property that we can set. And that property for us is just going to be the same variable name here. That might be slightly confusing, but the property is loading is set to the value is loading. And then we don't need to set up our component for the spinner itself because it's built into the container. Instead, what we do is give it a content template. And that content template has the result that we want to show. What are we loading? And when it's done loading, what do we want to display? So there's the same effect for our spinner, but this time we've wrapped the logic inside of a component, so we don't have to write those if statements. So that's an option. And then we can also control the spinner type. Notice that one defaulted to a specific spinner. We can customize that spinner as well through the spin loader. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. And then again, you can access these spinners just through their generic HTML and CSS, which is really cool if you want to create an overlay that comes up on your page and displays a loader as the application gets its resources. So that's possible too. And then I've got some other examples in the documentation as well. Here's one that uses an error state. So you can wrap error states in the spin loader template. So you have your loading template where you can totally customize what the loading mechanism looks like. You can wrap that in a table, whatever you'd like. There's an image up at the top here we can scroll to and see what that will look like. So we have a loading template, so you can completely customize what the loading animation looks like, and if there's any other content that you want to show while it's loading, you can use the content template to show the result. And then if there's an error, you can show yet another template that maybe has like a try again button, that type of thing. So it handles all sorts of different loading scenarios there, and it's um, a pretty useful component library for what little it has to do. And then, of course, we could talk about server operation too. Sometimes you'll run into things on Blazor server apps that use pre-rendering. And sometimes you'll have to use the on after render async method, depending on what your scenario is. So just keep an eye on that one. Now, that more complex scenario is what you see here in this animation. So this uses all three of the templates, and this shows kind of a faux data grid as it loads with no rows in it. It's loading with the spinner centered inside of it, and it's kind of grayed out the area there. So that's the full loading template. And that's essentially what SpinKit does. So Blazor Pro SpinKit, that's a free one, that's open source, that's out there that you can grab and start putting all different sorts of loading animations into your project. Super helpful. One of the first things I wrote for Blazor, by the way, it's about 3 years old now. It's required very little maintenance. It's very simple in operation. It does so little, yet so much. It's so cool. Now, there are uh, there are much bigger libraries. One of the ones that I am very fond of because I work there is the Telerik UI for Blazor, and there are some really neat things happening um, inside of that project as well. Good morning, Napalm. Welcome back to the show. So the next ones I want to show more loading scenarios. Like SpinKit covered the basic spinner, right? Hence the name, SpinKit. There's a lot of other different types of loading scenarios that we might want to talk about, and the Telerik UI for Blazor library lets you do all of these different scenarios without going out and getting different packages for each one. So SpinKit's great for that basic spinner. Um, Requires some customization if you have a large component like a grid, but it's completely possible. Now, just kind of off the cuff here, the grid itself, the Telerik UI data grid, has its own loading animation features inside of the grid built in, baked into it, including virtualization. So if you're doing virtualization, this actually takes care of that loading animation for you. All you have to do is enable that loading animation. So that's kind of a non-issue. The grid itself is kind of an all-encompassing component that does the things you would expect it to do without having to customize it further, um, using something like SpinKit or a loading animation. Now, there are other types of loading animations or standalone ones. There's under the interactive and UX corner here in the main menu of demos.telerik.com. So we have loader. And this is basically what we saw with SpinLoader or SpinKit. It is a standalone, just loading animation. And there's a couple different kinds here. There's a infinite spinner that kind of spins in place. And then there's this converging spinner that has the dots that kind of zoom into the middle. And any of the larger components that you see in the library that have a loading animation function can support these different loader types. So you can set these up for the data grid and things like that too. So this is a component that we can use just like we could SpinKit to build our own loading animations. So in this example here, if we run it, you can see that it's exactly what we saw in the demo section. And we've got our three drop downs to choose the type of spinner that we have. And this is the Telerik loader component. We can add a CSS class here. You can set the type, you can set the size, all of the things that you saw with SpinKit, you can do here as well. And notice it doesn't have an on-off state. It's always spinning in showing the animation unless we wrap it in some sort of logic that says, to hide or show. So we have the same type of behavior here. If we let's take out all the cruft here and just get down to the actual component itself. We might need to tidy up some of the text or the properties around it, just so we could see that it's really just as basic as the SpinKit loader is. So loader type here, I'm trying to remember if we even set that. Let's wipe all this out. Let's see if we can run this without any settings. It should default to at least one of those loaders. There we go. So there's our pulse loader. So we don't even have to set anything on this. Matter of fact, we could shorthand that as well. And that's just as minimal as we need to go. So we just define the Telerik loader component. And just like SpinKit, there's our component. If we need it to hide or show, we might need to wrap it in some sort of if statement and say, if this thing is loading, then show the loader. And there we're back to that scenario where we have to write code around this thing to hide and show the things that are loading and not loading. Similarly to SpinKit, we also have a container. Whoops, hit the wrong one there. We have a loader container for this as well. That again does a little bit more than just um, show the loader. This one gives you kind of a container that wraps around the UI of your application and then displays the loader on top of that modal dialog. So this goes kind of a step further. It's similar to the loader container on SpinKit, but this one kind of wraps up your page inside of it. So that one's pretty cool. And of course, you can customize this, for a region of a form or something that you're working on. It's actually a really good example there. You have templates for this as well. And of course, you can change the spinner types and things like that. So there's quite a bit of configuration that you can do with this type of a thing. So you can do different overlays here, the size of the loader, where it's positioned at, um, the color of the animating piece inside of it, so that type of thing. There, all this is really customizable stuff. And I know what you're probably thinking, like we just saw this with SpinKit. It's kind of the same thing. I thought we were going to talk about different types of loading scenarios. Well, there's other ones in here as well. If we go back to the main page, there are progress bars. So progress bars are another way of showing a loading state. And this one is showing kind of a long running process that has a definite start and end to it. It's still probably considered an indeterminate progress bar, but this one does have like a max value where we're trying to represent this as an installation of some sort. Maybe we're, uploading files, that sort of thing. By the way, the file upload has one of these built in, so you don't have to worry about that type of stuff. But this one uses a timer just to show some simple demos of how this would be used with a long running process. And that is yet another type of loading animation. So we have that determinate or indeterminate loading animation there. Um, Another one that I've used as a loader, but it is not technically a loader, um, is the radial gauge. So radial gauges can also be used as loaders. So there's different ways to kind of incorporate um, the radial gauge and arc gauge as a loader. Same idea as the progress bar. It just has a little bit more of a design flair to it. Depends on what kind of dashboard or whatever you're working with that this might make sense. So you can use that too. And then there's the chunk progress bar is more for task oriented things where you have a number of things that need to load or be processed. So I don't know if I'd classify that as a loader exactly, but it could be one. It could be. Leaves you open to some creativity. And then, of course, what I really want to get to today is the brand new component that we just released. You can see the little green badges on this new item. We just shipped this about a week or two ago. This is really cool. This is called a skeleton loader. And what the skeleton does is gives you a visual representation of the thing that is going to load. And these are really handy. These kind of they give your user a way of not feeling like you're just throwing a spinner in their face and they're waiting for something to load. These are a little bit more stealth, and they go a little bit less noticed because they look like there's some kind of content already there, and then it takes you a second to go, oh, okay, there's something loading in, and by the time you kind of realize this is loading, then the thing's usually loading. Depending on what the application is, your mileage may vary, but hopefully you're not waiting too long. And you just see these for a split second or something. And a lot of times you see this on something like a Facebook or Twitter, your social media accounts, that type of stuff uses these skeleton loaders quite frequently. They're really nice if you have like kind of a layout that's common with the content that you're shipping. So, for example, the layout here is a card layout, and we've kind of mimicked that card layout using the skeleton loading components. So these placeholder elements are just HTML, um, and they have a little bit of an animation attached to them, and it's highly configurable. So you've got different pieces that you can put together and mimic the UI that you're loading. So you've got the basic circle. That's great for like avatars and things, um, to show UIs as well. So where buttons may be, things like that, circle is going to come in handy. You also have the text. So it's just a basic bar. So you can represent lines and paragraphs of text, and then rectangle, great for images, things like that. There's a couple different animations here as well. The pulse is nice, or the wave is nice. I don't think it's as noticeable as the pulse, which is the default. Of course, you could go for none as well. Um, Depends on, again, what your app's doing, what your intent is to communicate to the end user. But I think Pulse, which again is the default here, is probably one of the best ones for UX. So that's nice. And again, this is integrated into the grid, so you can see the data grid uses this for things like virtualization. Actually, the grid I think has had this for quite some time, but we've broken this out into the individual component now, so you can use this in your own way. So if you go back to the main skeleton overview page and edit this guy in the Telerik REPL for Blazor, go ahead and ditch some of these other screens we had open. And this is that skeleton overview page. So what I want to kind of point out here is we can refactor this out and make a lot more sense out of this. This is just a demo to show users, uh, potential customers or current customers, what the Telerik UI for Blazor could do in the simplest way possible. But in the real world, you'd probably abstract these things out, right? So what we'll do next here, just take a few minutes to kind of break this down and show you how it would work inside of your application. And again, um, we can kind of dig into the individual components as we do this and show that each of these things, each of these skeleton blocks here is its own component. So first thing, let's do the skeleton card. So right now, everything's all in one. So if we look back at main.razor, we have all of these items that represent the skeleton card on the left, and then all of these things that represent the actual card that we're loading on the right. And what we probably have in a real world app is many cards on a page. Maybe they're in a grid, maybe they're in a long scrollable list, that sort of thing. And we want to load these in sections or something. So we probably wouldn't want to repeat this over and over again. What we'd want to do is abstract this away into a component like this and call it skeleton card. So there are some variables in here we'll have to kind of work out, but for all intents and purposes, this is what we want to have. We have Telerik card. Um, this has a custom CSS class on it. Um, and then these K classes are just some structural things that come with Telerik UI for Blazor. These are like layout classes. So this KH box here is a header box defining the header section of uh, that that card header. It's just probably just setting up some padding and whatnot. Um, this is the avatar div here uh, that wraps the skeleton component that is the circle. So there's our circle component. And then if we go down to card title, there's the second and third line with these items here. Now that's just the card header. If we look, there is a rectangle inside of this area that represents where the image will go. And then there are the card actions. So the card actions is this bottom piece that has the buttons and the likes. So that's where that information is represented. So we can annotate this a little bit if we would like. We could put a little bit of comments up here just to show where the individual pieces are. So this is the header section of the component. This is the image where the image would go. And again, this is the buttons. Just to break down those three sections there, the three main kind of horizontal rows that this component has. And now that I'm looking at it, I don't see any actual variables in here. So we should just be able to move this back over to the main page and represent that as a skeleton card. So now we can just render a skeleton card. We have that abstracted away as a component. So hopefully with that, you can see how handy this is going to be. So the next thing we'd want to do is maybe have a domain specific card, or we would have some sort of logic that's going to fill in the different sections of this card. So these would probably be parametered out, but we'd take the generic Telerik card and make some sort of domain specific thing. So like a travel card or something like that. Looks like we're setting up some sort of travel information or something like that. So we take that out and move it to a component. And then, of course, this thing would have parameters for the different variables that we want to set, like the title, the heading, and whatnot. We kind of pass those things, maybe bubble some actions up to the main component there, but hopefully get the gist of what we're doing here. So ideally, your page would look something like this. I'm going to get this wonderful bug here. Let's run that. Let's see if we can get that off the screen. Sometimes we'll get a little box that sticks on here. This is, I think, the Monaco editor does this from time to time. So let's go ahead and we'll just put a share button in here, and I will close that and reopen it. That should get rid of that gray box that gets annoying, and run that one more time. So again, we haven't changed anything. We've just kind of abstracted away a little bit just to simplify that demo down to something a little more what you'd find in an application. While I'm doing this, and I have this on my clipboard, if you want to open that up and follow along, you can. I'll post that in chat so you can check it out. So we have the skeleton card, we have the travel card. Um, Now, what we'd want to do is we set up a little if statement here. Say is loading. And if the thing is loading, then we'll show the skeleton card. And if it's not loading, we'll show the travel card. Like that. And we'll drop in a code block. And then let's see, let's do I'm just going to borrow a line of code from this in here. This is spin kit again, but it's just some logic I want to borrow. I want on initialize async. And then we're going to load some data. And what load data is going to do for us is just set up a task delay. And this is hopefully what our application would kind of implement. We'd have a task of load data that basically has some long running thing in it. And once that thing is done, it's going to turn off that. Oops, I forgot to define the variable. We need to define that. Is loading equals true. We'll default that to true. And not all code paths return a value. So task of load data. Needs to be async if we're not returning something from it. So now we should get the skeleton card, and then you can see these kind of overlaid. Oh, that was fast. We need to throw a couple more. Maybe another 0 on there, or is that too much? Let's try it that way. So we can get the full effect here. There's the card, it's loading, and then there's the result. So how about that? How does that look? Is that something that's pretty cool? So we've got different loaders that we can use for many different things, and I think that's a pretty cool example of what you can do. And it gives you a spectrum of things, right? You've got kind of a toolbox of sorts that you can work with. So there's the Blazor Pro Spin Kit approach, which instead of showing the individual line items from a grid or something like that, you just throw the loader over the entire UI except for maybe the header of that grid. And then you've got something that's on the other side of the spectrum where you can show an exact replica of what it's going to look like after it loads while it's loading. And then once you kind of wrap those things up into components, the syntax looks really nice and clean. I mean, we just got a simple if statement here. And again, you can even abstract that if statement away if you want and put some kind of loading container around this and say, if I'm in a state of loading, then I have a skeleton card. And if I'm in a loaded state, then I have my travel card. And you could even go further with this and abstract away a component. I think there's already a loader. Would be Telerik though. Loading You could put your own container together and just say if is loading. We'll do the simple way first and just copy what we have here. Basically, have your own container. Um, then you'll have some templates here instead of the actual components. Say code. We want a parameter that is going to be a public render fragment. And that is going to be the loading template. And we'll want a couple of these. So we'll take that one. That's going to be loading template. This is going to be the content template or the completed. However you want to phrase that is up to you. We'll just call it completed for simplicity's sake on the show today. So we have loading and completed. We'd render those out here. All right. We can go back to the main page and we can get rid of this and use a component instead. And I did not make a property called isLoading yet, so I'll have to go back and do that. Just realized I don't have that. So we put the loading state that way, and then we can specify the different regions here. And this makes it very explicit as to what it's doing rather than having to follow an if statement. So we have a loading template that has the skeleton card in it. This actually may make it very easy to test too if you're doing unit tests. These templates would be very easy to target with something like bunit. So we have our loading template, we have our completed template. Our travel card goes in the completed template. Making sure I spelled that right. And then, of course, we need the flag is loading. So we can save that. And it should work. Okay, it's showing both right now for some reason. So I didn't code something right, obviously. If else, if it's loading, then show the loading template, else show the completed template. Somehow, I've managed to display both. Okay, so that's pretty interesting. If I if I have an if statement, somehow I've got both states being true at the same time. That can't be. What have I done wrong, folks? What did I do wrong? I have loading template, I have completed template. Did I put it's not gonna let me a loading container is loading. Did I spell something wrong? Loading container. It seems like it's is loading is never assigned and always have the default value of true. That's weird. Something what did I do? No D? Did I no D load I misspelled something, didn't I? There's no D in what? Loading container. There we go. Thank you. And I think that is okay. So let's do this. I don't think there is a rename. I knew I misspelled something. So Timebender or no Smab says no D in loading. Is loading should be a public property. Yeah. So whoa, it's not gonna work. Loading container.razor. Live coding at its finest. Loading template. This needs to be a parameter. So we've got our public bool is loading there. That makes a lot more sense. Parameter is not valued. Property index or what? Oops. Didn't even make it a property. There we go. So that should work, I believe. There's our animation, and then it will complete, and that is our thing. So there's that much. We could add a third template here. And I know some of these things are built into Blazor as well. There's the error something or other component. But this makes a nice pattern too. You can do a parameter, and here we'll just, for copy paste sake, you could say error template. And then if there's some sort of error when this happens, because that is kind of a third state almost. So you're loading something, the loading has completed, but the thing that you were expecting ended up failing. Then you could come in and say if, I don't think I actually need the curlies on that or the escape character on that. And this would be an internal, or no, this would be a public parameter too. You would need to tell it has failed. Doesn't necessarily have to be part of this component either. I'm just showing you could do it this way. It has errors. Just so you can wrap everything up in a nice little shell, you can do this. If it has errors, then you drop the error template, else the task is completed. And hopefully that's all the bases that you need to cover. This should have had no change on what we're doing. Just give it a quick check. So thanks, Mab UK and Timebender, for pointing out the errors earlier there and getting me back on track. Appreciate that. So now we've got an error template we could use. Just double checking again. I called it, yes, error template. Making sure it's spelled all correct. And then you could drop in your error template there. So what you want to do is set up some sort of error state in this. You want to say is loading is false. You want to say error template or error. We need a flag. So you're doing your HTTP request or whatever, and this thing fails. So there's some sort of fail state. Oops, I did not pass that over. There's some sort of fail state, then you're going to want to show that it's failed and give a way of retrying it. And right now, this is just going to disappear because I put nothing in the error template. But you would essentially want to put something in there maybe another card with the button inside of it that says retry, just to make it a little bit more attractive. Give it the same outline. And then on your on click event, what you want to do is kick that process back off. So that's why we have load data separately here. Go ahead and load our data with our retry button. And that gets you in a nice little loop that you can let the users retry without blowing up the entire page. And did I do the signature wrong here? I think I did. We need to do the full, because it's async and all that good stuff. I'll just throw this in. Not getting a button click there. Or I didn't reset either. Nope, I had it right. I just didn't reset my stuff. You have to set the error back. No, the error's false. Loading has to be set back to true. So whenever we do this, we need to say is loading equals true. We need to kick off the loading. That's what was wrong. So now we should be in a loop where we have our loading animation, our retry button, our loading animation. There's no way to satisfy the success state here. So we could put something in here, obviously, to trigger that. And we would have in here to check to see if it has errors, and something to toggle this if there's an error. So when we retry it, it actually comes up with a good state. So what we essentially have is you set your loading state to true. You do some long task. That thing is going to probably need to be in a try catch block. So you're going to want to try this thing, and then catch any errors, report those errors to where they need to go. You want to log your errors, and then this is where you would set up your has errors to true. And then if there aren't any errors, of course, you'll want to, well, in all cases, you want to set your is loading to false. And of course, you probably want to reset this at the beginning, just in case there were errors and you retried it. So is loading is true, has errors is false. You go into a try catch block. You await whatever this thing is. Maybe the server goes offline in the middle of it. It kicks back an exception. You log that exception so you can troubleshoot it later. In the meantime, you trigger your errors flag showing a retry button, disable the loading animation, and then your user can retry, which kicks off this process again. And hopefully your server's back online this time, and the error gets cleared out. The catch doesn't trigger. Your loading animation goes away, and there is your thing. So that would be kind of the life cycle of that. So that's an hour, folks. That is the Blazor Power Hour. Hopefully that helped some of you find different solutions for loading things. Again, we've got the Blazor Pro Spin Kit. That's the free open sourcey tool. Very similar examples to what I just wrote out in that demo. It looks like I used the fancy finely block in here just to make that a little bit more readable. But this is a nice approach here to getting that try catch fail or the loading success fail kind of uh, pattern up there. You can use the spinners in this, or you can use the skeleton cards from Telerik UI for Blazor. And all of those things are really great choices if you're going to be having a long running process of some kind in your application, or maybe you know that users might have some limited bandwidth, that sort of thing. Even if you don't experience the need to have a long loading time, if it's over HTTP, I'm sure there's somebody out there at some point that's driving through an area that's got low connectivity, and you might want to have these three states in place: a loading state, a completed state, and an error state. So, driving through rural Ohio or Kentucky, and you miss that cell signal for a minute, you error out, you can at least retry it, get your nice little skeleton up there, and display your results when you come back. So that's all I've got. Thanks for joining me for another Blazor Power Hour. It's been a great time. Before we go, I just want to share some stuff with you very quickly. Now, if you're new to Blazor, I do have a project from Manning that might interest you. So if you go to Manning Publications, there will very soon be a live project, which is like a workshop that walks you through learning Blazor. That will launch sometime in the next week or two. So keep your eye on the Manning live projects for that, and my Twitter for announcing that. And then also, we have an event coming up here at Progress. So just got a quick video for you, because you might want to check out DevReach.
So, what is the best way to reach developers?
DevReach, of course.
Yes, DevReach, and we are back September 11th to the 14th, Boston Waterfront. Come and join us. There's going to be the latest in .NET, .NET MAUI, Blazor, Angular, accessibility, so many things.
I hope to see you there.
Make sure you check out the DevReach website. That is free to attend virtually, and there is a cost if you're in Boston to attend that in person. You can register through the website for that. We'll have tons of fantastic speakers from all over the place, including Microsoft. I'll be there. Our team will be there, and we'll be streaming a lot of it as well. So make sure you check that out.